Run with the Shard by Xena. Chapter 1. The Courier. The sky above the glacier never darkened anymore. Shards of color, auroras stirred by the unstable magnetosphere, spread like wounds across the heavens, bleeding green and violet light over the ice. Aurea Katie pulled her coat tighter as she descended the frozen steps carved into the glacier wall. The air here bit sharper than knives, every breath rasping against her lungs. Below, lights gleamed. The entrance to the Nemesine Archive, a city carved into frozen stone, glowing faintly from within like a lantern buried in snow. She reached the gates just as they opened for her. The archivists were waiting, hooded figures draped in white woven with strands of silver. They looked less like people and more like the shadows of ideas. "Courier Cade," one of them said. The voice was neither male nor female, a flat tone shaped by years of modulation. "You understand your task." Aurea didn't answer at first. Her eyes lingered on the archivist's face, pale and unreadable under the hood. She had carried secrets before. Stolen songs, fragments of dreams, even confessions ripped from dying minds. But never this. Finally, she said, "You're giving me a memory you don't want anyone else to see." The archivist's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Not quite. We are giving you the first memory. What happens to it is beyond us now." A second archivist stepped forward, carrying a small case. Inside rested a crystal shard, no larger than a thumbnail, glowing faintly blue. Aria's chest tightened the instant she saw it, though she had no neural port to connect with. She felt it anyway, a tug at the back of her mind, as if the shard were whispering her name. She snapped the case shut and slid it into the reinforced pocket of her coat. "Where does it go?" "South," the first archivist said, "beyond the drowned cities. To the Tower of Winds. You will know it when you see it." "And the payment?" "Safe passage," the archivist said simply, "for you and for those you may someday call kin." Arya snorted. "I don't plan on kin." The archivist tilted their head. "All couriers say that. Few believe it." A sound broke the silence. A low rumble, far away, like ice cracking beneath the weight of something vast. The archivists turned their heads in unison, as if listening to voices only they could hear. "Go," the first one said. Already, the echoes stir. Arya tightened the straps of her pack, pulled her hood low, and stepped back into the aurora-lit night. The chip's faint pulse beat against her side, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. She felt its weight more than any she had ever carried. Somewhere in the drowned ruins to the south, something waited for her. Or perhaps everything did. Chapter 2. The Drowned City. The ice gave way to water after only 3 days of travel. Arya stood at the edge of what had once been a metropolis. Skyscrapers jutted like broken teeth from the ocean, their lower levels lost beneath black, brackish waves. Bridges sagged under their own rusted weight, and the wind carried a smell of salt, mold, and metal. The city had no name anymore. On old maps, it had been Seattle, but now the couriers called it the Drowned City. Arya adjusted the filters on her mask. The air here was thick with spores, the legacy of biotech experiments gone feral decades ago. Some said the city itself was alive, breathing through its ruined towers. Her boat was little more than a scavenged skimmer, patched sails, a solar engine that coughed more than it purred. It glided silently between the buildings, the waves slapping softly against steel and glass. She kept her eyes on the water. Things lived down there now, things no one had given names to. The shard pulsed against her ribs, always steady, like a second heartbeat. But here in the drowned city, the rhythm seemed to quicken, as if it remembered. Arya shook her head. She had carried memory chips before. They often bled fragments into the air, images, sensations, words whispered from the past, but never so strong. Never so insistent. She docked the skimmer at the base of a tower whose upper floors still stood dry. Inside, the walls dripped with condensation. Moss crawled across shattered concrete. She climbed by flashlight until she reached a half-collapsed office. A faded mural still clung to one wall, smiling faces of people long dead, their eyes bright with optimism that felt alien now. That was when she heard the voice. Arya. She froze. The sound hadn't come from outside. It had blossomed inside her skull, cold and intimate as breath on her neck. "Echoes," she muttered. She had expected them eventually. Digital ghosts, fragments of minds uploaded so recklessly that they had burned themselves into the world's networks. They couldn't die, but they couldn't live either. They drifted, feeding on stray memories, slipping into human thoughts whenever they found a way. A flicker of static shimmered in the air before her. Slowly, it shaped itself into a figure, tall, faceless, humanoid only by approximation. Its edges crawled and shifted as if made of fractured glass. Give it to me, the echo said, its voice 100 whispers woven together. The first memory belongs to us. Arya drew her blade, short, curved, its edge laced with conductive wire. It wasn't for killing, it was for grounding, a weapon that could cut the digital from the physical long enough to escape. You can't touch me, she said, though her voice sounded hollow in the ruined room. The echo tilted its head. We don't need to. The shard is calling. Sooner or later you'll open it, and when you do, we will be waiting inside. Then it dissolved, leaving only the sound of dripping water and Arya's heartbeat pounding in her ears. She tightened her grip on the blade, forced her breath steady, and pressed forward. She still had days of travel before the southern seas bathed, but already the ghosts of humanity's past had found her, and the shard pulsed stronger with every step. Chapter 3: The Diver. The rain came heavy that night. Sheets of it drummed against the broken windows, filling the hollow tower with a constant roar. Arya huddled in the corner of the office, her coat wrapped tight, the shard's faint glow seeping through the fabric like a secret she could never put down. She hadn't slept long before the sound changed. The steady drum of rain broke into splashes, deliberate ones, rising from the stairwell below. Someone, or something, was climbing. Arya was on her feet in silence, blade in hand. She killed the flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, listening. The figure emerged slowly, a person in a patchwork wetsuit, mask dangling at their chest, hair slick with salt water. They carried a spear tipped with scavenged metal, and their skin shimmered faintly with bioluminescent tattoos that pulsed like breathing light. The stranger froze when they saw her. Then they smiled, tired but not unkind. Courier? They asked. Their voice was rough, cracked by salt and smoke. Arya kept her blade raised. Depends who's asking. Name's Kael, the stranger said. Diver. I keep this sector clean of things that crawl out of the water, or try to. Arya didn't lower the blade. And why climb into my shelter? Kael's smile faded. Because you're not alone. They've been trailing you since you entered the city. Before Arya could ask what he meant, the air crackled. The shadows at the edge of the room thickened into static, resolving into multiple echoes. Their shapes flickered and bent, tall and gaunt, their faceless heads cocking in unison. Arya, Arya, Arya. The voices layered over each other until the words shook her bones. Kael moved first. He slammed the butt of his spear onto the wet floor, releasing a surge of blue sparks. The echoes shuddered, their forms fracturing at the edges. Grounding coils, Kael shouted over the noise. Not perfect, but it buys time. Move. Arya didn't need telling twice. She slashed at the nearest echo as she ran, her blade cutting a rift through its body. The thing tore apart like smoke in a storm. The two of them bolted down the tower's stairwell, the echoes surging after them like waves of glitching static. The sound of their pursuit was wrong. Half screech, half digital distortion. Where are we going? Arya demanded as they splashed down into the flooded lower levels. Kael shoved open a half-submerged door. Underwater. They can't follow where the network doesn't reach. Cold water closed around her legs as they waded into a collapsed subway tunnel. The echoes screamed behind them, but at the water's edge they faltered, flickering violently as though torn between presence and absence. Then, with a final distorted shriek, they collapsed into nothing. Arya surfaced in a pocket of air further down the tunnel, gasping, hair plastered to her face. Kael leaned against the wall, chest heaving, tattoos pulsing faintly in the dark. She glared at him, blade still in hand. Why help me? Kael met her eyes, calm despite the exhaustion. Because I know what you're carrying, and if you plan to survive the journey south, you'll need someone who can swim deeper than ghosts. The shard pulsed once, as if it agreed. Chapter 4: The Forest That Breathes. They left the drowned city by dawn, steering Kael's patched subskimmer south. For days, gray waves stretched endless in every direction, broken only by the spires of sunken towers or the ribs of rusting ships. Then, without warning, the water grew shallow. Islands rose from the sea, not of stone but of something alive. The forest came into view like a living storm. Towering trunks of pale, fibrous material loomed from the water, their surfaces veined with pulsing bioluminescence. Leaves shaped like translucent sails caught the wind, exhaling faint clouds of spores that glowed in the aurora-lit sky. Kale cut the engine and let the current drift them inward. The verdant expanse, he muttered. Old biotech experiments seeded themselves here after the collapse. No one knows how deep it runs now. Aurea scanned the horizon warily. And we have to cross it? Unless you'd rather face the open seas, Kale said, eyes narrowing. I'd take trees that breathe over what's hunting the waters. They disembarked onto a route that was wider than a road. The surface was springy underfoot, warm as living skin. The air smelled sweet cloying with an undertone of rot. Every breath felt like swallowing something that wanted to stay inside. As they moved between the trunks, the forest responded. Leaves folded shut as they passed, branches swayed without wind, roots shifted underfoot as though adjusting to their weight. The forest wasn't just alive, it was aware. By nightfall, they reached a clearing where the roots formed a shallow basin. Pools of glowing liquid collected there, casting green-blue light across the clearing. Arya set down her pack, but the shard's glow had grown brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the forest itself. Kale crouched at the edge of one pool, dipping a finger into the liquid. Nutrient serum, he muttered. The trees feed themselves with it, and sometimes other things. Arya frowned. Other things? Before Kale could answer, the surface of the pool shifted. Something rose slowly from the liquid, a shape humanoid in outline but translucent, its body threaded with glowing veins. It had no eyes, yet it turned toward them with unmistakable focus. Another rose from the opposite pool, then another. Kale swore under his breath, spear in hand. Symbionts, the forest's protectors. They don't take kindly to outsiders. The creatures stepped onto the roots, their bodies leaving trails of glowing residue with every movement. They moved slowly, almost gracefully, but their intent was clear. They were closing in. The shard pulsed again, harder, almost desperate. For the first time, Arya felt it push against her mind, pressing images into her skull, a sunlit world, green fields, children laughing, a memory she had never lived, but that threatened to make her drop her blade and weep. She staggered, clutching her temple. Kale grabbed her shoulder, eyes sharp. Whatever it's showing you, don't look too long. That's how they break you. The symbionts reached the edge of the clearing, their glowing forms swaying like dancers. Arya forced her breath steady, blade drawn. The forest whispered around them, 1,000 leaves exhaling in unison. The verdant expanse had seen them, and it would decide whether they passed or were consumed. Chapter 5. The Symbionts. The symbionts circled the clearing in silence, their glowing bodies casting warped shadows across the root basin. Arya held her blade steady, but her pulse thundered in her ears. Kael shifted his stance, spear ready. Then one of the symbionts spoke. Its voice was not sound, but sensation. A vibration in Arya's skull, half memory, half dream. Images flashed through her mind. Open skies, a hand clasping another, warmth without fear. For a moment she wanted to fall into it, to let the shard answer, to let the past flood through her. But Kale's hand squeezed her arm, grounding her. Don't, he hissed. It's not speaking, it's testing. Still, Arya stepped forward, lowering her blade just slightly. Wait, if it's testing us, maybe it wants something we can give. The symbiont tilted its faceless head, its glow intensified, reaching toward her chest, toward the shard. Arya clenched her jaw. It knows. Kale cursed under his breath. Everything wants the shard. You really think this forest is any different? The symbionts advanced in unison. Their movements were fluid, not hostile yet, but inevitable, as if Arya had already been chosen as an offering. Try to talk, Kale muttered. If it fails, we fight our way out. Arya closed her eyes and opened herself to the shard, just a sliver. Instantly, the forest roared inside her mind, not with words, but with longing. She saw flashes of the world before collapse, the same fields and skies, children laughing, rivers that ran clear. The symbionts surged closer, their light pulsing in time with the shards. For a heartbeat, they were connected. Arya understood. The forest wasn't protecting itself. It was remembering. It wanted the first memory as badly as the echoes did, not for power, but for completion. Then the images twisted. The laughter became screams. The rivers turned black. The fields burned, and the symbionts lunged. Now, Kale shouted. Aurea snapped the connection and slashed upward, her blade cutting through one symbiont. The creature burst into a spray of luminous liquid that hissed against the roots. Kael drove his spear into another, sparks flashing as its form fractured like glass. But more emerged from the pools, climbing with eerie grace, their bodies glowing brighter as if fueled by the shard's pulse. Too many, Arya shouted. Kael yanked a coil of wire from his pack, stabbing its prongs into the wet root beneath them. A surge of electricity ripped through the clearing. The symbionts convulsed, their light flickering violently before they collapsed into the pools with a hiss. The forest groaned around them, leaves folding shut, roots tightening as if in pain. The clearing dimmed, the bioluminescence fading until only the shard glowed steady against Arya's chest. They didn't wait. They ran. Branches swayed overhead, releasing clouds of spores that glittered like stars. The forest wasn't done with them. Each breath Arya took burned in her lungs, heavy with something alive. But they pressed on, deeper into the verdant expanse, the shard's heartbeat guiding them forward. When they finally stopped, hours later, Kael collapsed against a root, sweat dripping down his face. Arya leaned on her blade, chest heaving. "You were right," she said. "It wasn't speaking, it was trying to take it." Kael's eyes flicked to the shard's faint glow beneath her coat, and it almost did. He paused, then added grimly, "Next time, courier, you might not be strong enough to stop it." Arya didn't answer, because part of her wasn't sure she wanted to stop it. Chapter 6. Fractures. The forest thinned by degrees, the massive trunks spreading wider apart until the air grew easier to breathe. Arya and Kael found a hollow formed by an arching root, dry enough to build a small fire from driftwood scavenged along the edges. They sat in silence as the flames crackled. Above, the canopy shifted like a living ceiling, translucent leaves glowing faintly with their own inner light. Arya pulled the shard from her coat, holding it in her palm. Its glow had dimmed since the symbiont's attack, but she still felt its pull, steady, patient, like a tide that never stopped rising. Kael's eyes lingered on it. "You should hide it better. Try, even wrapped in lead, I can still feel the thing humming, like it wants to crawl inside me." Arya closed her fist around it. "That's why I carry it. I don't have ports. It can't get in." "Maybe not through a socket," Kael muttered, "but I saw you in that clearing. It almost broke you open anyway." His words stung because they were true. Arya remembered the fields and rivers, the laughter that wasn't hers but had felt more real than any memory she owned. For a moment, she had wanted nothing more than to stay in that world, even if it killed her. Kael poked the fire with a shard of metal. "What is it to you, anyway? A job? A paycheck? No courier risks this much for a simple delivery." Arya stared into the flames. She hated questions like this, questions that dug under her skin. But the silence pressed too heavy, and Keel's eyes demanded something real. "My mother," she said finally. "She was a courier, too. Never made it back from a run. Like, all I got from her was a chip she smuggled out before she vanished, a memory of me before I could even walk. Sometimes I think that's the only proof I existed to her." Keel's expression softened, the firelight painting sharp lines across his face. "So you run memories because you're chasing hers." Arya's jaw tightened. "Or because I don't want to forget her like the rest of the world already has." She slipped the shard back into her coat. "Either way, I don't plan on failing where she did." For a long time, only the fire spoke. Finally, Kael leaned back against the root, gaze tilted to the glowing canopy. "I wasn't chasing anyone. I was running away. Diver clans, my people, they tried to turn themselves into the ocean, gills, luminous skin symbiosis with whatever lives below now. They called it evolution. I called it surrender, so I left." Arya studied the tattoos on his arms, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent rhythm. "But they changed you anyway." Kael's smile was bitter. "No one leaves untouched." The fire crackled lower. Both of them carried ghosts they couldn't shed. Arya lay back, staring at the shifting light above. For the first time since she'd left the glacier, she allowed herself to wonder, not about survival, but about choice. If the shard really did hold the first memory, did she have the right to decide what to do with it? Her eyes closed, but sleep didn't come easily. The shard's pulse echoed faintly in her chest, whispering fragments of a world that had never been hers. And she realized with a flicker of fear that part of her didn't want to resist anymore. Chapter 7. The Ash Eaters. Dawn crept into the forest with pale light, filtering through translucent leaves. Arya and Kael doused their fire, packed what little they had, and pressed on. The air was cooler here, the roots giving way to patches of soil, blackened as if burned long ago. It wasn't long before they smelled smoke. Kael froze, nostrils flaring. Not forest fire. Campfire. Arya's hand went instinctively to her blade. They crept forward until the trees opened onto a clearing where figures moved among tents stitched from scavenged cloth. There were dozens of them, men, women, children, all marked by ash smeared across their faces and arms. Some bore scars from burns, like others wore masks fashioned from charred metal. At the center, a fire blazed unnaturally bright. Not wood-fed, but something else, a chemical burn that gave off no smoke, only heat. The people knelt around it, whispering in low chants. Keel's jaw tightened. Ash eaters. Arya glanced at him. You know them? Nomads. They worship the world's collapse. They believe fire cleansed humanity of its sins, and they keep the fire burning to finish the job. His voice hardened. They'll want the shard. As if summoned by the thought, a figure broke away from the circle, a woman with a cloak made of scorched cloth and a mask of bone. Her eyes caught Arya's immediately. You carry it, the woman said, voice raw but certain. She raised a hand, and the chanting fell silent. The ember of the first spark, the memory of beginnings, give it to us and the world will burn clean. Kael stepped forward, spear raised. She's not giving you anything. The woman's gaze shifted to him, and for a moment the air itself seemed to tighten. Diver blood, you reek of false gods. You should have drowned with your kin. Her followers rose, brandishing weapons fashioned from bone, rust, and fire-hardened wood. The clearing bristled with hostility. Arya felt the shard pulsing like a drumbeat against her ribs, stronger than ever in the presence of these zealots. Whispers pressed into her mind. Burn it all. Start again. End the cycle. She staggered, gripping her coat, torn between nausea and temptation. Kael caught her shoulder, steadying her. His eyes never left the ash eaters. We fight our way out, courier. They won't let us walk away. But Arya hesitated. The leader's words echoed in her skull, mingling with the shard's call. If the first memory could start the world anew, wasn't fire one way to cleanse what was broken? The ash eaters advanced in slow unison, their chanting rising again, a rhythm that matched the shard's pulse. Arya tightened her grip on her blade. She didn't know yet if she was about to cut them down or hand them exactly what they wanted. Chapter 8. Fire on the Roots. The ash eaters surged forward, their weapons raised, chanting in unison. The air thickened with heat as the chemical fire at the center of the camp roared higher, throwing long shadows that danced like predators. Kael didn't hesitate. With a roar, he hurled his spear into the nearest zealot, sparks flaring as the weapon's coils discharged on impact. The man convulsed, crumpling before he hit the ground. Arya drew her blade, its conductive edge humming faintly. The first ash eater lunged at her with a jagged piece of metal. She sidestepped, slashed, and the zealot fell in a spray of blood and ash. But there were too many. Dozens closed in, their chanting rising louder, faster, a rhythm that matched the shard's thundering pulse against Arya's ribs. Burn them. Burn everything. The whisper wasn't hers, but it filled her head until she almost believed it. For a heartbeat, she wanted to give the shard to the fire, to let the ash eaters finish their holy purge. A flaming spear grazed her shoulder, searing fabric and skin. The pain snapped her back. She snarled, driving her blade upward, cutting through two attackers at once. Kael ripped his spear free from a corpse, whirling to block another strike. They're driving us toward the fire, he shouted. Arya glanced at the pyre. The flames twisted unnaturally high now, forming shapes, faces screaming, hands reaching. The ash eaters weren't just worshipping it, they were feeding it. The shard pulsed harder. Her knees buckled. For an instant, she saw the flames not as destruction, but as rebirth. Cities rising from cinders, skies clearing, oceans boiling clean. She almost stepped toward it. Arya! Kael's voice cut through the vision. His hand yanked her back, just as an ash-eater's blade slashed where she'd stood. Stay with me. Rage flared in her chest, burning hotter than the fire. She fought with renewed fury, cutting down zealots left and right. But the chanting only grew louder, and the pyre blazed brighter, drawing strength from their sacrifice. Kael's voice was raw, desperate. We can't hold them forever. We need to break their circle. Arya's gaze snapped to the leader, the woman in the bone mask standing tall at the edge of the fire, arms raised in command. Every chant rose and fell with her. She was the heart of it. Arya met Kael's eyes. He nodded grimly. Together, they cut a path through the mob, blades sparking, bodies falling. The zealots clawed at them, teeth bared, ash streaking their faces like war paint. But Arya's focus narrowed to the bone-masked woman, the shard pounding like a war drum inside her chest. She leapt, driving her blade into the leader's side. The woman gasped, eyes widening behind the mask, before collapsing into the fire itself. The chant broke. The pyre screamed. Flames roared skyward, then imploded, sucking inward with a thunderous rush. The remaining ash-eaters wailed, scattering into the forest. Some fell to their knees, clawing at their faces as if their god had abandoned them. Arya staggered back, chest heaving, the heat searing her skin. The shard's pulse slowed, returning to its steady, patient rhythm. Kael pulled her away from the dying fire. His hands shook, his face slick with sweat. You almost lost yourself back there. Arya couldn't deny it. The shard had nearly convinced her to surrender, to burn with the rest. And worse, part of her still wondered if that might have been mercy. She sheathed her blade, staring into the blackened remains of the pyre. The ash-eaters were scattered, but not gone, and if word spread, more would come. South still waited. The Tower of Winds, the end of her journey. But the shard was winning, piece by piece. Chapter 9. Ash and Silence. They left the ash-eaters' camp at dusk, the air still thick with the stench of chemical fire. The forest seemed quieter than before, its breathing slowed as if watching them with cautious disapproval. Arya and Kael found shelter beneath the ribs of a fallen trunk. The wood was fibrous, almost flesh-like, but dry enough to light a fire. Kael worked in silence, his hands shaking slightly as he struck sparks. Arya sat opposite him, her coat heavy with the shard's weight. She hadn't let go of it since the fight. She didn't trust herself to. The fire caught, sending a thin plume of smoke curling into the canopy. Kael finally spoke. Back there, you almost gave it to them. Arya didn't answer. The words cut too close. You're strong, he continued, voice low. Stronger than most I've met. But the shard, it doesn't care about strength. It digs until it finds what you want most. Then it offers it. That's how it wins. Arya stared into the flames, remembering the visions. The world remade in fire, her mother alive again, holding her as if she'd never left. She clenched her fists until her nails bit into her palms. You talk like you felt it, she said finally. Kael's eyes reflected the firelight, bright and haunted. Not this shard, but others. Divers found fragments in the deep, memories that survived the floods. Some of my kin grafted them into themselves, said they could remember being human before the collapse, said it gave them purpose. He looked away. Most of them drowned in their own heads. Arya swallowed hard. And you? I refused, he said simply, but they left their marks anyway. He raised his sleeve, showing his arm. The bioluminescent tattoos pulsed faintly, their rhythm almost matching the shards. Sometimes I think I'm just another memory waiting to be erased. Silence stretched between them. The fire popped. The forest shifted. Arya took a long breath. If I fail, Kael, if it breaks me, you can't let it spread. You'll have to. Her voice caught. You'll have to end it. End me. Kael's expression hardened, but he didn't flinch. He leaned forward, back meeting her gaze across the fire. No. If it breaks you, I'll drag you back. I'm not letting the shard decide who you are. Arya wanted to believe him. She wanted it more than she wanted the shard's promises. But the whisper still pressed against her skull, patient and sweet. Let me in. Let me show you. She turned away from the fire, lying down with her back to him. Sleep didn't come. The shard pulsed. The forest breathed. And in the silence between them, she feared she was already losing. Chapter 10. The Singing Roots. They pushed deeper into the verdant expanse, where the trunks rose so tall their tops vanished into mist. The air grew warmer, damp enough to bead sweat on their skin, and the ground softened beneath their boots until each step sank slightly, like walking on muscle. By midday, they entered a stretch where the forest hummed. At first it was faint, like the low vibration of distant machinery, but the deeper they walked, the louder it became, until the very air trembled with sound. Arya stopped, pressing her hands over her ears. What is that? Kael grimaced. The singing roots. heard stories, never believed them. The roots underfoot pulsed, glowing faintly in time with the hum. The sound wasn't just noise, it carried shapes, suggestions. Whispers threaded through the vibration, too low to be words, but clear enough to feel. Arya caught flashes in her head, faces she knew, moments from her childhood, her mother's voice calling her name. She staggered. It's showing me. I know. Kael cut her off, his own face pale. Don't listen. But the sound grew sharper, resolving into something almost like music. Not random, but deliberate. The forest wasn't just alive, it was singing, and its song clawed into their minds with memories neither of them had given it. The ground shifted suddenly. Roots surged upward, twisting into arches, weaving together until the clearing became a cathedral of living wood. The hum became a chorus, deafening, drowning their thoughts. Arya dropped to her knees, clutching her head. The shard blazed against her chest, its pulse synchronizing with the song. The visions came harder, faster. A city before the floods, her mother's face unscarred by grief, herself as a child laughing in the sunlight. Stop! She screamed, but the forest only sang louder. Kael hauled her up by the arm, his bioluminescent tattoos flaring painfully bright as if fighting against the song. It's feeding on us! Move! They stumbled forward, but the roots shifted underfoot, rising like serpents to block their path. Faces formed in the bark, flickering with half-remembered expressions, mouths opening in soundless screams that joined the chorus. Kael slashed at one with his spear, sparks bursting across its surface. The root recoiled but didn't fall. Arya swung her blade, cutting through another, only to watch it knit itself back together seconds later. The forest didn't want them dead. It wanted them to join. The shard pulsed violently, almost breaking free of her coat. Arya fought to hold it down, her vision blurring with tears. Kael, if it takes me, shut up and run, he roared. They forced their way through the writhing roots, every step a battle. The song reached a fever pitch, pressing images into their skulls until Arya no longer knew which memories were hers and which belonged to the forest. Then, just as suddenly, the sound cut off. They stumbled into silence, collapsing on the other side of the cathedral. Behind them, the roots stilled, the glowing veins dimming to nothing. The forest returned to its steady breathing, as if nothing had happened. Arya lay on her back, chest heaving, the shard's glow still pulsing through her coat. Kael spat into the dirt, his voice hoarse. That wasn't just memory, that was hunger. Arya stared up at the canopy, trembling. The shard had almost sung with the forest, as if the two were meant for each other. And for the first time she wondered if carrying it south was less a mission and more a lure.